Welcome back to the podcast history of our world. Chapter 9. Sargon and the Akkadian Empire. If you assume that the land known as Sumer was inhabited by Sumerians, you'd be right. But it's not like they're the only ones that live there or have lived there. Case in point, the Ubaid people. So yes, while the Sumerians are the dominant ethnic group in that region, there is another group that is becoming more and more prevalent: the Semites. Nowadays, most people attach that word to those of Jewish ancestry, although the term can also really be applied to Arabs, Assyrians, and the Habesha, or Abyssinians of Ethiopia, just to name a few groups. The origins of the name Semite are biblical, and come from Shem, a son of Noah, an ancient forefather of the Hebrews. But from a geolinguistic perspective, the very earliest ancient Semitic peoples spread out from the Arabian Peninsula and went south into Yemen, and then further into Ethiopia and Eritrea, and north into the Levant and Mesopotamia, where they formed and developed their own specific subcultures and language groups, like the Phoenicians and Babylonians. These people traded and mingled freely with the Sumerians, in addition to founding their own cities in the area. One such Semitic people hailed from the city of Akkad, as it was known to the Sumerians, although in the local Semitic pronunciation it was Akkadu, or simply Akkad. These Akkadians worked well with their Sumerian neighbors and were frequently used as mercenaries or as trading partners, but never as equals in power. Being second doesn't sit well with some people. It's either first or nothing. And such was the case with one of these Akkadians, called Sharu, or better known to us as Sargon the Great. Under his leadership, either in the mid-2300s or mid-2200s BC, there would come the first multi-ethnic empire and Semitization of Mesopotamia. A monumental task, and in a display of generosity and forethought, he had much of his life and deeds recorded, so we could know the truth of how it all went down. Well, his version of the truth of what went down, at least. The beginning of his autobiography should let you in on what I mean. Sargon the mighty king, king of Akkad am I. My mother was lowly, my father I did not know. My city is Azupiranu, on the banks of the Euphrates. My lowly mother conceived me in secret, placed me in a basket of reeds coated in bitumen, and cast me down the river which did not drown me. The river brought me to Aki, the irrigator, who in the goodness of his heart lifted me out and raised me as his own son, appointing me gardener. As a gardener, the goddess Ishtar loved me, and after 4 years I ruled the kingdom. The black-headed peoples I ruled, I governed. Hey, do you know of any other famous babies put in a basket and sent down a river? Sounds a bit like Moses, huh? It's entirely plausible that later Semitic travelers used the baby in a basket origin as a way to emphasize divine provenance. Just think about how the flood myth and the Tower of Babel also had their origins in Sumer. Now, could it also be that the birth of Moses has its origins with the Akkadians? It's a valid theory, and by valid theory, I mean I have no idea. But let's check back in with Sargon, who isn't actually lying about his humble origins. The 4-year relationship with Ishtar, probably. Did he not listen to Gilgamesh talk about her exes? Ugh. So Sargon actually worked as a gardener and later as a cupbearer for King Ur-Zababa of Kish. In addition to having a great name, the king had been having these strange dreams at night and asked Sargon if he too had been having visions. Sargon revealed that he had indeed experienced a disturbing premonition, that the goddess of love and war herself, beautiful and terrible Ishtar, his future girlfriend, had tried to drown the king in a river of blood. Ur-Zababa naturally freaked out at this, but in addition to fearing for his life, ordered Sargon to be executed. Because personal attendants are supposed to say things like, oh yeah, I dreamt you ruled for 1,000 years and everyone was happy and paid their taxes on time. Rivers of blood don't exactly inspire a lot of faith, but Sargon is somehow able to escape, lead a revolt against King Ur-Zababa, depose him, and assume the mantle of King of Kish. Remember, that title still carries a lot of weight behind it. Sargon's first priority as boss? Change his name from Sharu to Sharukinu, which means the rightful or legitimate king. Good PR move. Second priority, time to go a-conquering. Sumer is currently under the thumb of that brute, Lugal-Zaggisi, and his presence is kinda messing up the Sargon rebranding thing he's doing. The records speak of Sargon launching a surprise attack against Uruk, Lugal-Zaggisi's capital city, so to speak. During or after the Akkadian victory, Sargon ends up demolishing the famous walls built by our man Gilgamesh. The survivors fled to the armies of about 50 other Ensis who were accompanying Lugal-Zaggisi on foreign conquest. Of course, once all this became known to him, all plans were cancelled and he came running back to Sumer with all haste. It was here that the Sumerians squared off against the Akkadians in a battle that would decide not who, but which people would rule the land. Lugal-Zaggisi had many fighters under his banner, but there was also Uruk-agina's curse hanging over his head. And in a stunning victory, the Akkadians stood triumphant. Lugal-Zaggisi was soundly defeated and taken hostage, being shackled with chains and a dog collar to boot. Sargon's new pet was dragged along to bear witness to his great victories over the remaining Ensis in the south, conquering Nippur and before reaching the shores of the Persian Gulf, where he symbolically washed his sword in the water, thus indicating that Sargon the Akkadian, Sargon the Great, had conquered all of Sumer. Not too shabby. And now it's time to lose the extra baggage. Sargon has Lugal-Zaggisi executed, while his army turns north to put down Umma and suppress the rioting from other Sumerian cities which stubbornly rejected his rule. One such city, Kazallu, must have angered him something fierce because it was leveled so thoroughly that, and I quote, "not even the birds could find a place to perch." Demolishing cities aside, the accomplishments of the Akkadian military stem from their fighting prowess, although Sargon can also take credit not just as their commander. Under his guidance, the Akkadians had a professional standing army, the first in the world, if not the second after Eannatum. Fiercely loyal veterans could pass on their knowledge and experience to new recruits without having to tend their family estates or businesses. War is now their business. And while part of their winning strategy was to adapt the fighting styles and techniques from the people they conquered, the Akkadians also relied on their secret weapon. Used in the right hands, it could equalize a battle under an unrelenting hail of carnage. This was the composite bow, wielded first by either Sargon or his grandson. Instead of fashioning a large bow out of a single piece of wood, the bowyer glues layers of animal horn, wood, and bone together, with sinews for the drawstring. This method of construction offered significant advantages. Its smaller design created less recoil, while the composite layering produced a flexible but stronger weapon twice as strong as a regular bow, and able to fire from twice the distance. Leather armor offered no protection, and at closer range, even bronze armor did not guarantee safety. The enemies of Akkad had every right to be fearful of Sargon, and he wasted no time capitalizing on that fact. From his victories in Sumer, he took his armies north to the kingdom of Subartu before turning west to conquer Mari and the kingdom of Ebla. After that, he went east to the Zagros Mountains, defeating the Elamites at their capital of Susa, carting off precious resources and loot from each one of these excursions. Legend has it that he even conquered Cyprus and supposedly Crete, but even if he made it that far, there was no way to hold on and manage these places. And that's really the goal here. Sargon's a warrior, yes, but he's also an empire builder. To deal with the constant threat of rebellion, he appointed numerous Akkadian governors, officials, generals, and other positions of power to keep the peace. Yeah, essentially all the best jobs were given to Semites, but it also ensured loyal workers. I don't believe it was done with the overt intention of turning Mesopotamia into a Semitic wonderland, but it definitely provided a foundation for that. And despite the simmering ethnic tensions that no doubt existed between the conquered and the conquerors, Sargon's reign is noted as a golden age for government efficiency, justice, and economic prosperity. Trade routes were established with Egypt, southern Arabia, and far away as India, even perhaps Ethiopia, thus increasing the variety of luxury goods as well as necessary resources like timber and ore to Sumer. He's also credited for building the first city of Babylon, and also probably Akkad, which means that he and his folks weren't technically Akkadians prior to, well, right now. Don't think too hard about that one, because historians aren't quite sure if the city existed prior to or after Sargon's reign. Many texts claim he was the one who built the city, however, so let's just stick with that. And for all his Semitic pride, Sargon was also very reverent to the Sumerian gods, constructing numerous temples and shrines. His daughter, Enheduanna, became the high priestess of An, the Sumerian sky god, and in contrast to her father's violence, she is famous for her poetry, writing about her religious devotion, frustrations with war, and glorifying the gods and goddesses, especially Inanna, whose name changes to Ishtar. I offer one of her hymns for you, about the temple of Inanna in the city of Zabbalam. O house wrapped in beams of light, wearing shining stone jewels, waken in great awe. Sanctuary of pure Inanna, where divine powers the true me spread wide. Zabbalam, shrine of the shining mountain, shrine that welcomes the morning light, she makes resound with desire. The holy woman grounds your hallowed chamber with desire. Your queen Inanna of the sheepfold, that singular woman, the unique one who speaks hateful words to the wicked, who moves among the bright shining things, who goes against rebel lands and at twilight makes the firmament beautiful all on her own. Great daughter of Suen, pure Inanna, O house, Zabbalam has built this house on your radiant site and placed her seat upon your dais. After a long 56-year reign, Sargon dies probably around 2279 BC, and predictably his empire cracks apart in revolution. This happens all the time in history. A powerful unifying conqueror is a victim of their own success. His son Rimush succeeds him, but spends just about his entire reign dealing with rebellion in Umma, Adab, Elam, and Lagash, amongst the many. He tries his best to keep Dad's legacy intact, but 9 years after taking the throne, he was assassinated by palace aides with, and I'm quoting here, their seals, or sealed tablets. Meaning, he was bashed over the head until he stopped moving. Nasty business. He was succeeded by his older brother Manishtusu, whom some suspect of orchestrating a bit of fratricide to achieve this, but nothing's conclusive. Manishtusu began his reign by, again, squashing revolts, although visions of Sargonic glory ignited desires to do more than just babysit Sumer. He took the Akkadian army down the Tigris, fighting everyone along the way, and apparently launched a fleet from the Persian Gulf to conquer some unknown land for its silver mines. His rule lasts for 15 years before karma bites him in the butt, and he too is assassinated around 2255 BC. His son, Naram-Sin, takes the throne next, and has the added burden of trying to revitalize this sickly empire. But first things first, whereas his grandfather Sargon was happy to be called King of Kish, Naram-Sin preferred the title King of the Four Corners. Or if you want to be specific, Lugal Naram-Sin Shar Kibrat Arbayim. Oh, and the living god of Akkad. That's not too much to ask, right? After the traditional suppressing of the rebellions, he took on the king of Makan, or Majan, for his copper mines. The jury's still out on where this is. Most scholars are leaning towards Oman, although there are others who say the Sinai Peninsula. Naram-Sin also recorded how he conquered the kingdom of Armani in eastern Anatolia, which may possibly correlate to ancient Armenia, as the legendary ancestor of the Armenian people was named Aram, or Aramanak. Not content to add these two victories to his resume, Naram-Sin also went after the Lalubi, a highland tribe of the Zagros Mountains who had previously accepted Sargon's authority. These people will quickly fade from history, but their name lives on, as does their defeat in a victory stele commissioned by Naram-Sin. On this fractured but still detailed chunk of ancient stone, the Akkadian king is depicted with a horned helmet and long beard, symbols of his godhood, and he stands proudly, head tilted up towards the heavens, his army beside him, as the Lalubi beg for mercy, one already pierced by a spear. Modesty's not one of his strong suits, but I mean, we do get a great piece of art history out of it. It's kind of a rotten deal for the Lalubi, but if it's any consolation, Naram-Sin is about to learn that if there's one thing the gods hate the world over, it's hubris. For some unexplained reason, during a conquest of the Sumerian city of Nippur, he raided and sacked the holy temple of Enlil. If that name sounds familiar, it's because that was the god who created Humbaba and begrudgingly gave Utnapishtim immortality. Now his temple had been defiled, a blasphemous deed that would no doubt earn his wrath. And guess what? It sure did. Maybe it was just a coincidence, or maybe it really was divine retribution, but emerging from the Zagros Mountains came the nomadic and mysterious Gutians. Instead of the carefully organized armies of the Akkadians, the Gutians were wild, undisciplined, and deadly. They never sat still for long, using hit-and-run tactics to keep the enemy off guard and raiding villages with unmatched ferocity. Ancient sources say that they covered the earth like locusts, the great fields produced no grain, the fisheries produced no fish, and the gardens produced neither honey nor wine. In short, they are the barbarians at the gates. The civilized people of Akkad and Sumer trembled at the very mention of them. And to make matters worse, they arrived in the midst of a great climate shift across the region, causing massive droughts and crop failure. Famine was rampant as the Gutians spread throughout the Akkadian Empire, and Naram-Sin was helpless to stop them. He died a broken man around 2218 to be succeeded by his son Shar-Kali-Shari, who ruled on for 24 years until 2193 BC. All the while struggling to maintain the empire. It was all for naught, and the last king of Akkad, Shu-Durul, succumbed to the Gutians in 2154. The city of Akkad is destroyed so completely that it has still not been discovered. The empire of Sargon the Great brought 180 years of order and structure to a region typically divided with rivalry. The Akkadians took the power away from the Sumerian priests and Lugals, those big men who were essentially glorified warlords. Their language became the common tongue of the land, used for financial transactions, literature, and diplomacy. It became so popular that Sumerian as a spoken language would eventually be relegated to religious services, much like Latin in the Catholic Church today. Sargon himself would achieve a legendary status that the rulers of Babylon, Assyria, and Hatti would all wish to emulate. In fact, an Assyrian king from 722 BC would rename himself Sargon in an overt attempt to connect with a glorious past. Even the Babylonians would claim that it was Sargon who built their fabled city, even if it couldn't be conclusively proven. Yet for all the ambition and glory the Akkadians sought, they were helpless against an uncivilized tribe of hill folk. Another familiar theme in history, the unwashed barbarian hordes swarming in from the distant mountains, destroying all in their path, desiring nothing except to undo the works of civilized man. Sometimes it's not so cut and dry. Sometimes the barbarians have a rich culture of their own and seek to reclaim some distant glory or right some wicked wrong. But that's not the Gutians. They are inept conquerors, knowing nothing of agriculture and city life and not wanting to learn about it either. Irrigation canals are ripped up, farm animals are set loose to roam free, people are suppressed by absent and strong-handed rulers whose names fill the king list for no other reason than Vivictus, woe to the conquered. Sumer is officially in a dark age. Next time, we'll look at what happened to Sumer during this age of darkness. Alright, it's bad, but it's not that bad, for everyone at least. Lagash has a new leader who's practically a reincarnated Uruk-agina. The border kingdoms of Sumer are putting the economic squeeze on the Gutians by controlling trade upriver, and to the south in one of the most ancient of the Sumerian cities, a new leader has emerged with a passion for justice and devotion to his citizens' safety and well-being. These Gutians have gone too far in their blind invasion, imperiling the lives of the people, his people. And to that, there's only one singular consuming thought on his mind: revenge. On the podcast history of our world.